build and lead an indispensable business? That is the topic of the hour. Hello, good day, greetings, and bonjour to people from all around the world. Welcome to the live. Now, this particular series is called Impact 2.0, where we feature purpose-driven leaders making a dent in the universe in their own special way. Stick around till the end, and I promise you that you'll walk away with at least one, if not more, practical yet scrumptious takeaways from each of these live sessions, like an ice cream sundae topped with heavy whipped cream, melted dark chocolate, and a dash of gold dust. But most importantly, if you turn up live, you'll get a chance to ask each guest questions that are bugging you like an itch that can't be scratched. Now, my today's guest is the founder of Indispensable Consulting, 6 times business book author, and has been featured in Inc., Forbes, Fast Company, Bloomberg, and many more places. He believes that a vision story replaces the tired and listless vision statements of the recent past. Vision stories set a tone and direction that a vision statement just can't do. So will you please put your virtual hands together to welcome my fantabulous guest, Jim Kerr.
Wow, that was incredible, Amber. Thank you. Great to be with you today.
How are you doing?
Doing terrific. Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, not bad. We're coming to our end of lockdown, so I'm quite looking forward to this post-COVID world.
Yes, you and me both.
All right. Now, before we get into the dumplings and soy sauce of this conversation, we are going to start off the show with a quick fire round. Are you ready, Jim?
I guess as ready as I'm going to be.
All right. It's all fun and games, so don't worry about that. Okay. Anything. All right. What 3 jargon words would you eliminate from the US dictionary?
Well, it's pretty tough. You know, as a consultant, I use a lot of jargon. In fact, I probably even invented some. But there's one phrase I've been hearing lately that I just don't care for and probably won't adopt, and that's that whole idea of an idea shower. Brainstorming is good enough for me.
Okay. Okay. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, it's coming up, and I'm not going to use it.
Okay. All right. All right. If you could only read one book over and over again for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
Again, a real toughie. I guess I'd go back to Tom Peters' first book, In Search of Excellence. I think it set the stage for all of us that followed in his footsteps. So I guess I'd choose that one.
Absolutely, absolutely. Love that book. If you could take 3 things to a desert island, what would they be?
Well, I need a bow and arrow so I could, be able to catch stuff to eat. I'd want a blowtorch to start a fire.
Yeah.
And I think I would probably bring some powdered basil because that'll just make whatever I catch tasty.
So cool. I love how everyone gives me a different answer to this question and the quirky things they want to bring to the island with them. It's so fun. All right. What's the best advice you've ever been given?
Don't be afraid to be successful.
Ooh. I guess we'll dive a little bit on that later on in the show. Don't be afraid to be successful. If you could have any superhuman power, Jim, what would it be?
Here's what I think I do really well. I'm able to get a lot of stuff done, and I think sort of modularly, if that's a word, and I can, put together different combinations of things that I may have done in the past and create wholly new objects out of it. So I guess my superpower would be to be able to do that even faster than I do already.
Awesome. Just want to say hello to some Kaleem. I think that's Amy. I'm not sure because StreamYard doesn't show me the face of her, but I think that might be Amy. Thank you guys for joining us. All right, Jim. This marks the end of the quickfire round. And do you know what that means?
Da-da-da-dum.
Yes, it means that you have now officially arrived. And if you'd like to give me an arrival pose while I create the mood for it. You have arrived, Jim.
Wow. Thank you. It feels so good.
All right. It's now time to get into the dumplings and soy sauce of this conversation. Now, Jim, imagine that I'm holding a pair of boxing gloves. Could you take these gloves and smash for me, and not my face, please, but some kind of leadership myth, a bogus strategy, or a misconception, and set the record straight once and for all?
Yeah, I mean, I think where I would go with that question is one where I see a lot of the folks that I coach often need some help with, and that's that idea that we can't be decent and still be great leaders. Somehow there's this perception that I've got to be tough and I've got to, challenge everybody and so on and so forth. And I think we've kind of lost our way a little bit with the whole topic of decency and leadership. So I would say that might be where I'd start.
Yeah, that's a good one, because yes, I've got a lot of questions around that, because that is a very big myth that we do need to bust, and we need to talk about it. So just a quick side note here, we are streaming to LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube simultaneously. If for some reason your LinkedIn stream plays up, which it can do oftentimes, so you can continue over on a YouTube channel, which is bit.ly/spreading ideas with Amber Khan. Alrighty, now Jim, let's get back into this conversation. Before we go any further, could you share with the viewers and listeners why do you do what you do?
I started in consulting over 30 years ago. I hate to admit that now. And all of the work that I've done in there, the thought leadership stuff, I've published well over 500 articles in the trade press over that period. I've just launched my 6th book. All of it's been about trying to contribute to the betterment of leadership thinking. That's been my inspiration. That's been my goal. That's why I continue to try to push on the boundaries and get at some of the things that I think would make leaders better.
So this has always been your game. Like
absolutely.
Yeah. You just knew that this is the path you want to walk.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of it was I saw people in this space as a young professional who weren't really good at it. They were looking to gain billable hours. They didn't really care about results. They were, pickpocketing, I felt, some of the companies that I worked for at the time. And I thought to myself, I could do this better. And that's kind of what contributed to me getting into consulting. I'd written my first book already. While employed by a company, and I was getting a lot of phone calls and invited to speak at a lot of conferences. The book had really taken off, and I realized that maybe I could be a consultant, and that's kind of when I pivoted and haven't looked back.
All right, awesome. It seems like that you were meant to do this, because a lot of people, it takes a long time for us to figure out. A lot of people change careers. I've seen lawyers become marketers, doctors become marketers. It's a different journey for everybody. It takes a while sometimes to figure out what we're here to do, what's the purpose, who we're here to serve.
So you know what, Amber? I mean, if I could riff on that for a minute, one of the things I can recall back in college was I really had a love for philosophy. And keep in mind, I was in a business school, right? So philosophy courses were things you kind of took on the side of your program.
Yeah.
But I always felt, a certain comfort in those things and learning about that stuff. And I often thought as a college student that I'd love to be a philosopher and maybe get a log cabin on a lake and write these great philosophical, books and so on.
Yeah.
And what I really ended up recognizing was I could offer business philosophy through the work that I was doing as a consultant. And that's really been a fire that continues to ignite within me.
Yeah, that's super awesome. So you recognize your skill set and combined them both with your knowledge and made a career of it. That's
Yeah,
super.
created passion for me.
Mm,
Right.
yeah, yeah, and I guess that's another thing, where passion drives good leaders to do good things. Um, I mean, in a minute, we're going to talk more about the myth you just busted. But I wanted to talk about your recent special report. You said that the world that awaits us can be better than the one we are so afraid to leave behind. Why do you think so?
Well, I mean, keep in mind, I wrote that piece way back at the beginning of COVID. So that was back in April of last year. And I made some predictions in there, and I tried to offer advice on what to look for as we were going through what turned out to be this incredible challenge. And it's still a challenge, right? Even as we speak today on it. So yeah, my thought was we have the opportunity to sort of become the greatest generation 2.0. In the States anyway, we talk about the greatest generation being the World War II generation.
Yeah.
And how they overcame all these great challenges and created this better world because of it. I feel we have the same opportunity now with COVID. We can come out of this thing and start to change some of the things that didn't work so well for us. We've got, in some ways, a blank palette, and we can reset a little bit and do things better than we had been prior to this outbreak.
So I guess what you're saying is that this gives us the adversity of time gives us an opportunity to innovate more.
Absolutely, yeah, sure, and redefine how we do things. I mean, even thinking about going back to the workplace, I think it's probably going to involve different elements of a conversation that we probably wouldn't have if not for the pandemic. The debate right now is how much virtual work will we continue to retain in the new model going forward, and I think that's a really interesting question and challenge for business leaders now and into at least the near future to kind of answer that question.
Yeah. Well, since you've touched upon it, so let's talk a little bit more about that. That where do you see, or how do you see companies now? Before that, everybody or big organization, let's say the Fortune 500, the enterprise level companies, always thought that virtual or remote working is not the way to go. Like they wanted employees in the office. They had a rigid system to measure everybody's performance. Suddenly COVID has changed and the same companies have come on board. How do they now view this, and can they retain this? And what, I don't know, what processes do they need to put in place to make it possible going forward?
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. Kind of starting first things first, I think we've absolutely shattered the notion that we can't be productive remotely. If you think about it, as overall, like on whole, businesses were able to pivot and create an enablement within their workforce to support remote work. Things like Zoom and other tools became readily available. People took advantage of them. The technologies were already there. There were investments made, of course, by big businesses to get their workforce enabled. So I think that first sort of challenge has been proven to be one that we can overcome. We can be productive and we can be remote.
Yes, absolutely.
The question, of course, is what impact does that have on culture? What impact does that have on camaraderie, teamwork, and so on? So those are still questions I think we're going to have to wrestle with a bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and time will tell, I guess. Yeah, that's another area that needed more advancement, I guess, the culture, maintaining the right culture of the business. I think that's been an issue even before COVID, and now there are different complicated issues involved as to building the culture of the business.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Amber. And here's what I offer to clients that I'm continuing to work with on this. If you didn't have a great culture pre-COVID, you probably still don't have a great culture. If you had a good culture and you felt productive and people felt valued and they understood what the vision was and they felt part of it,
Yeah.
then I think the remote workforce can still maintain all of those good vibes and the culture is still probably pretty well intact.
Hmm. Hmm. And do you think that if we talk about the companies who, let's say, who had a good culture going into COVID, and now that all the employees are remote, do they need to do something extra, something different to now make sure that that culture continues within the organization, even though we are all working remotely?
Yeah, I think the short answer to that, Amber, is yes. We've got to keep working deliberately on culture. But I would have answered the question the exact same way pre-COVID, that you've got to be deliberate about your culture.
Yeah.
What I would offer to the direct question is I think whatever you do in this sort of COVID and post-COVID world to maintain your culture and include the remote workers that you might have, can't be contrived. It's got to be something that you really think through and you know what result you're trying to achieve, and then you put those kinds of things in place to achieve them.
Yeah. So culture can't be contrived. I like that. So those of us joining us now, Jim earlier on busted a myth that we can't be decent, or we can't. The myth that decent people do not make great leaders. All right, so let's talk more about that, because I was actually I'm going to share a research later on, but let's talk about why did you think that, and what's the process for going forward to make it not for leaders to be indispensable in their businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think decency still has a place in business. I think somehow we've maybe lost that a little bit. I would say that we were beginning to lose it pre-COVID, though. I wouldn't say that COVID necessarily made people operate less than decently.
Yeah.
But I will say, I've been doing a little bit of writing for CEO World, and I wrote a 5-part series on decency recently, and tried to really explore that and push a bright light on the topic. And in one of the pieces, I actually quote Harry Kramer, who's a former CEO, big consultant, is now a professor at the Kellogg School of Management. He was an endorser of my book. In fact, his quotes on the back cover. And he was asked one time, how do you sleep at night? And it was in reference to, you've had to do these layoffs and cost cutting, and you impacted all these people's lives. When you had to do that, how can you sleep at night?
Yes.
And Harry kind of thought about it, and he came back with an interesting answer. And I feel like that's sort of the acid test for all of us as leaders. And it was this. He says he asked himself 2 questions. The first one is, did I do what I thought was right? And the second question was, did I do my best? And that's, to me, that's decency in a nutshell. If you can answer yes to both of those questions, then keep moving forward, But if you answer no to one of them, or both of them, then you might want to rethink how you're doing things.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's not, those questions do not just go for your business, for making decisions in business. They're the same questions for life decisions as well,
For sure. Right.
Absolutely. All right. So, I'd like to know that when you're working with organizations and their leadership, what would you say are the top 3 traits of an inspirational leader?
Wow, Amber, you get some really tough questions. I thought the lightning round was tough. Let's sort of unpack that.
Yeah.
I think the first piece would be to be able to define a vision. So we need to be able to at least know where we want to go, right? The second piece would be to be able to articulate that vision in such a way that it's compelling and engaging and people can see themselves being successful by helping you achieve it as a leader. And then I think the third part would be walk the talk. It's not good enough to kind of say, yeah, you know, this is what you should do while I go do something else. It's got to be, here's what we're going to do, and let me show you what good looks like through my behavior. Watch my feet. Don't necessarily worry about what I'm saying, but watch what I'm doing. And that to me would be the three elements of becoming a really inspirational leader.
Yeah. I mean, at most organizations, I think this is the toughest part, being able to convey your vision, because a lot of times it stays in the head of the CEOs, the founders, the executives. It's in your head, and you're thinking, well, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know what vision I have for this company, how I want to grow. But the rest of the company the employees don't have a clue. Right?
Right, and you know, you sort of started our conversation today with a quote from me about that, right? And it's that whole notion of you've got to be able to tell a story, and people have to be able to see themselves in it. It's not good enough to have a vision statement, something so simple, and I know you've seen this before as well, Amber. I mean, it can't be a sentence on the back of your business card. Why? Because every business in your space probably has the same sentence. I want to be the best insurance company on the planet. I'm going to be the greatest computer manufacturer in the world. That's not good enough.
You're number one at customer service.
Right. You know, we put our customers above all. Okay, so does everybody else. So what makes you different? What's that compelling thing that people can rally around and support within your organization? How do you describe that? It's got to be a story. And again, why? Because people learn from the earliest ages from storytelling. So we're used to learning that way. So tell me the story of this business. Tell me what it looks like to work there. Tell me who you work with. Tell me who your customers are. What tools do you use? What technologies are supporting that? You know, and I think it's through storytelling that we're actually able to articulate a vision that's compelling and people can buy into and understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Hi, Terry. Hi, Dave. Oh, look, Jim, what's Dave got to say? James Kerr is the most practical executive coach, tactical thought leader on LinkedIn today.
Thank you, David. David's a great friend and colleague, and man, thanks for that comment.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, what would you say, like, why is it so difficult for leadership to come up or be able to define their vision in a story? Like, what's stopping them? Is it the age, generational gap? Because I see millennials doing it quite well, I don't know, in your experience.
I mean, it could be, though I don't think that's all of it. It's not just that in a nutshell. I think oftentimes it's people don't recognize the importance of it or see the value in it or think of it, of that vision work and mission and all that as being sort of motherhood and apple pie, like they don't think there's any value in it. And I kind of always ask the question when I get that reaction from clients, and I've had it many, many, many times, too many to count really, over the years. And I ask them this question, then how do you expect people to do what you need them to do in order to achieve your goals? If you can't tell them a story of what that looks like, then you really can't expect them to hit the mark.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And it's probably the reason that they do not yet see the value in sharing their vision story. But I guess, that's changing a lot with I've seen with the newer companies coming up on the same. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the different differences in the leadership style of men and women. Because I came across this 2018 report on women and leadership published by Pew Research. Maybe you have come across it as well. And they talked about that Americans see different traits as being more beneficial for men than women who aspire to leadership positions. For example, traits like ambition, decisiveness, and assertiveness are seen as helpful for men in both politics and business, whereas traits like being compassionate as more helpful for women than men. Why do you think that women, when women are assertive, they are seen as bossy and rude, and when men show compassion, they're seen as weak leaders?
Well, I mean, it's conditioning, right? I mean, you can go all the way back to cartoons that kids watch growing up, and the traditional male-female roles that are portrayed in those kinds of things. So from a really early age, we're taught the difference, right?
Yeah.
And when we get into the corporate setting and we see men and women behaving in ways that aren't part of what's been imprinted in our minds, over the last 20, 30, 40 years, we don't like it. It's confusing, it's stressful, and we label it. And I don't think that's right, but I think that's what happens. So it's a deep societal shift that would really be needed to change all of that noise around it. However, with all that said, I just wrote an article this past week on the idea of supporting equality of everybody, right, in the work setting. And the thing that I offered through the article were 5 questions. Answer these 5 questions yourself, And one of those questions is, do you think it's right to treat people differently or unfairly? If you really think of it that way, you frame the question that way, all of a sudden, who would say, yes, I do, I think it's true, we should definitely treat those kinds of people differently than these kinds of people? Wouldn't happen, right? So I think the examination of this topic, and it's a tough one to answer, right, and to solve. We're not going to solve it today.
Yeah.
But I think it's got to start with each person, and they've got to ask themselves these questions and explore where they're coming from themselves and start to identify things in the way they're behaving in order to make this change happen.
So they're pretty much self-discovery questions, as from what I can see, from what I remember, the questions. It's pretty much about, looking inside out,
Right.
about what we think, how we feel, and our actions. What do they portray?
Yeah, I mean, Amber, I can't change you, and you can't change me, but we both can change ourselves. So the point of the questions were to ask those questions for yourself and answer them for yourself, and then decide based on your answers, is there anything in there that I need to change? Is there anything in there that I want to work on? And my guess would be that some of the questions will be like, yeah, no brainers, this is exactly how I am and how I operate, and some things might actually identify a place where you might want to spend some time getting better. Doing better, being decent.
Being decent, yeah. I wonder, how do your conversations go when you talk to, let's say, Fortune 500 leaders, executives who've been doing things their way for the longest time, and now you come in and you talk about empathy, compassion, and leadership and stuff. How do they take that in? How do they see it? Do they value that, or they're like that? That's for millennials.
Mostly we don't start there. We get there. We get there. But we start with it's got to be about them. I mean, the executives whom I coach have things that they want to work through and things that they want advice on or a sounding board or whatever. And that's where we begin. We have to start on their terms to come out on our own, if you will.
Yeah.
So it's about them. We're simply the sidekick in their hero story.
Absolutely.
And I would say that that's something that I've learned and I continue to try to promote in the way I do my work.
Yeah. So I guess leaders have to be open to that conversation, right? We first have to open up to,
Sure.
and admit that, that yes, there is room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, my friend Dave Summers, who made the comment earlier in our conversation,
Yeah.
responded to a post that I had on LinkedIn on feedback. And his comment was, well, it has to start with trust.
Mm,
And I would say that that's the same message here, right? In order for us to have these kinds of dialogues with leaders, we've got to establish trust, and it's got to be
mm,
an okay environment to talk about these sticky subjects.
mm,
And I would say that, through my coaching work, which is a little different than the consulting work, but through the coaching work, I am able to get there most of the time, because it gets lonely at the top, and the top leaders don't have a sounding board, and
mm,
they can't show vulnerability sometimes, and so on.
mm.
So that's where it's great for them to seek coaching, and keep in mind, even world class athletes have coaches, right?
Yes.
So it's not something for someone to be shy about and not consider, because I think it's more critical the higher up you become in your organization that you have a coach you can count on, who's going to tell it like it is, keep it real
Yeah.
for you,
Yeah. Yeah.
help you learn, push on your boundaries.
Absolutely. And I don't know if it's just me, or whether this does seem to be the trend that I have not seen it before. That now I see more leaders talking about emphatic leadership. Being compassionate. Which I don't know. 5 years ago, I didn't hear leaders talking about leadership in such a way. What's brought this change about?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with what's going on in the greater society, right? People are recognizing that they have a role to play in changing things. And as a leader in a business, there's a role to play. You can be the living example of what good looks like, what
Hmm,
decency looks like.
hmm.
So I think it's encouraging that people are willing to start to talk about this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm glad we're talking about it, Amber,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I love talking about. I've had few guests on in this topic of emphatic leadership, because we all want to be we want to be better at what we do, right? And every day we strive to be a better leader in the market that we are in, or the people that we are serving. And I do believe that we can only do this by being more compassionate and showing more empathy to whom we serve. So, and then we get the same in return. I do not, or have never seen it as a weakness, even vulnerability as a weakness. So,
Now
um,
you've got to be strong.
yeah.
In order to show that side of you, you've got to have confidence.
Mm,
You've got to believe in yourself and be okay with exposing something that might not be the most attractive part of you.
yeah. Yeah.
It takes a lot
Absolutely.
of strength.
Takes a lot of strength. Yeah. Well, and I guess that goes with your responsibility of a leader, right? It's not an easy thing to do. Being the leader requires, not only confidence, but it's courage. And because there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulder, and if you've taken on that role of leadership, you now need to make sure that you are in a position to give people what they want. Otherwise, I guess.
Sure, I mean, it's an obligation, and I think a lot of people love all of what comes with being a top leader.
Hmm,
But I don't know that they all do it as authentically and as purposefully as they might,
hmm.
because leadership's tough. It's people. It'd be real easy if we didn't have to deal with people.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. No
Uh,
emotions involved.
right. So if I'm a leader, that by definition requires that I have to be able to deal with people and all the quirkiness that comes with that, and all the
Yeah,
great things that come with that. And If we're going to do it responsibly and take those things seriously and not be phony about it,
Yeah.
then it's going to take some work. And we're going to have to continue to learn and continue to get better at our craft, if you will, as
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah, I also feel that I mean, you mentioned that every one of us, all good, athletes have got coaches, and all executive level leaders also need coaches. I feel like every organization should have a coach on board. Like, it should be a part of their team, because your employees are going through life happens for each one of them, and unless you have, and it's very unlikely that one leader has all the skills to be able to deal with all the problems the employees are having, right? So having a coach on board in the team, I feel that should be a part of every organization, so that they're able to not only coach the leader, but the teams individually in groups. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I love the idea. I've got a client right now that actually I'm doing consulting work with, but they also have a half a dozen or so high potential staffers who they've asked me to coach to help develop them. So when these C-level opportunities come up, they'll be ready.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think people are adopting that idea more and more. It's not, in my opinion, widespread, but I do
Mm.
think it's something that's growing in interest. And I think people are asking for that. They want a sounding board. They want someone to challenge them, someone to shine a bright light into what they're doing, how they're operating. So if they choose
Yeah.
to, they can get better. And again, it's a choice. Leadership's a choice, and self-improvement's a choice. You've got to
Yeah.
decide that you care enough about it to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, I mean, we know now, that previously Fortune 500 companies existed for 100 years, 150. Now we know it's less than 30 years. The number is decreasing and decreasing. And it's dependent on a lot of things, but I believe leadership is one of the big things where things are going wrong, and businesses lose their integrity and what they stand for.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in what you say that's true, and it's been my experience as well. You know, the the thing that I see more often than not is we don't deliberately develop leaders.
Mm.
There used to be a time when training departments were
Mm.
able to provide great leadership training and develop the basic skills that one needs to be halfway decent at it, right?
Yeah.
Now we've got this thing where it's sort of, I don't know, short attention span theater, like if it takes more than 2.5 minutes, I can't focus that long. So what's happened to training? Well, now we're getting these sort of micro lessons, 2.5 minute video on listening skills.
Mm. Mm.
I don't know. I took listening skills training. It was a
Yeah.
3-day course. you know,
Right.
I don't know if I could get everything I got out of those 3 days in a 2.5 minute clip.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd argue you can't.
Right. I guess, but that's where, because now as we move into millennial and then Gen Z generations that is coming, which is used to social media, used to consuming quick content, quick pieces of content, which is short clips, images, memes, and they're absorbing knowledge in that form. And I guess they might say that they absorb information differently to others before, and that's why people are producing all sorts of content to reach everybody, long form content for those who prefer to read long blog posts, or like you said, be part of a 3-day course or workshop, and others for watching clips on videos. But it seems that I don't know, it's a generational gap, and there's different now a lot more choices available when it comes to consumption of information. And it seems Dave has got something to say. Video is not the enemy as long as it points you at deeper learning knowledge. Absolutely. I agree. And I mean, there are all forms of, you can learn it through video, audio, text, whichever form you prefer. Some people love reading books and they can't stand videos, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for all of it,
Yeah.
but I think the point I was trying to make is, and it was to a question that I interpreted, maybe this wasn't what you intended, Amber, but I interpreted as like, why do you think there's weak spots in leaders today?
Mm.
And one of the reasons is I think we don't formally train them well enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of, like you say, generational reasons perhaps and so on. But, you know, to be good at something, I think requires a combination of formal learning. I think it
Yes.
requires self-motivation to get really good at it,
Hmm.
and develop your skills, identify places where you need improvement and so on. And I think it behooves top leaders to provide that capability to their workforce if they want to build a workforce that supports the achievement of their vision.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I had a little while back, I had 𝒂𝒏𝒕 from VaynerMedia as a guest here, and she shared that in their company, in their organization, they do weekly group coaching calls. So obviously, they've got I don't know, 8,000 employees or something. So obviously, they have to do it in small groups, but it's part of their vision and the culture of the business, right?
Right.
That they see that as a very important part of coaching all their staff on weekly basis so
Mm-hmm.
that everybody gains the skills that they need to move forward or to be able to tackle the problems they might be facing at that point in time in their life. So I thought that's really forward thinking of
I do
as
too.
well.
I think you've got to make a commitment.
Yeah.
I've worked with a client recently that, talked a little bit about training. I'm not a trainer, okay? It's not something that I particularly focus on, though I've provided tons of training over the years. And in fact, I was part of an adjunct faculty teaching graduate level strategic planning classes for over 20 years. So teaching and training and things are part of what I do, but it isn't really my first, it's not the first cog in the machine, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was asking them about, how much do you dedicate to training your staff? We're
Mm,
going through transformation. Transformation's tough. We're trying to get people skilled up on new behaviors.
that's right.
What do we do? And, their training budget was something like less than 20 hours a year.
Wow.
So if you're only going to put 20 hours, invest 20 hours of training in somebody, I'm not sure how much change we're going to make.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's one, really, when you think about it, it's one sort of deep
Yeah.
dive training session is about it.
Yeah. Priorities.
Yeah, what's important, that's what we measure and that's what we spend our money on.
Yeah. That's so amazing. All right. A quick note that this show is sponsored by 𝒓𝒆𝒑, where we give discerning entrepreneurs with a clear, impassioned, and distinctive message to share. Tools to go from humdrum to dynamite without feeling like an imposter, without hiring and managing team of editors, designers, and content writers, and without riding on the coattails of blood-sucking PR agencies. You will also find best bits of this show repurposed into short clips on my channel, which I'll share the link with you here, bit.ly/spreading ideas with Amber Khan. So, Jim, this brings me to the topic of thought leadership. And whether you see thought leadership as part of building an indispensable business, and if so, how do you use it for growing your own consultancy?
Yeah, I mean, thought leadership to me is absolutely critical across the board, regardless of the business you're in. You want to have people within your organization that are offering new ideas, new thoughts, developing concepts, and spreading that knowledge, if you will, across the concern. So I think it should be happening. It should be promoted. It should be a skill we look for in people. as we develop top tier leaders for tomorrow, right? So
Yeah.
that would be one thing. As far as myself, yeah, as a consultant and coach, I've got to stay top of mind with the
Mm,
people in my network. And the way that I do that is I write articles and books and so on.
mm,
So that's a critical part of what I'm about. And I think it should all be done with a high level of integrity. You should represent what you think and not try to play to an audience and give them stuff that you think they want to hear. I think you have to be authentic
mm.
and have a point of view. And sort of, earlier we talked about the decency acid test. I have another acid test for thought leadership. And it's
Right.
and it's really simple. It's two questions, and we need a yes to both of these questions. The first one is, do I have a point of view?
Hmm.
The second one is, now that I understand where I'm coming from on this,
Yeah.
might my point of view actually help somebody else? If the
Yeah.
answer is yes, then produce it, create that content, get it out there. If I have a no answer to either one, that
Mm.
indicates I've got work to do. If I
Right.
can't stand behind what I'm talking about, if I don't think it's going to make a difference to
Mm.
somebody who might consume it,
Yeah.
then it's not worth producing.
I love that as a test. I think I'm going to steal those two questions when I'm
Okay,
talking to
wonderful.
that's absolutely correct. I mean, there's just two questions, and they really get you thinking. That okay, am I onto something, or no? There's still a bit more work required here. So yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing this.
I got to tell you, there's a lot of, in my opinion, anyways,
Yeah.
inauthentic uh, stuff being produced by people
Mm.
because it's popular or they think it's
Yeah.
it's supporting their brand or something. And
Yeah.
I think if you really can't own it, if it's not how you lived your life,
Yeah.
then you're being disingenuous. And to me, that's the first sin of thought leadership, is not keeping it real.
Yeah, not to be right. That is actually, unfortunately, the times we are in, that happens a lot, because it's so, thanks to technology, it's so easy to put content out there, and a lot of people, like you said, are not, being inauthentic about what they share or what they talk about, because their goal is, or their vision is very small, you could say. They're not even thinking long term. This short-term investment, and they may be able to make some money, a few bucks in the short term, but in the long term, the brand isn't going to stand. It will fall on its knees. So yes, it's for us, for consumers, it's about wading through all of that information.
Yeah, it's
Jump,
noisy.
yeah, yeah,
Very
it's amazing.
noisy out there.
Yeah, a lot of noise out there, and that's why it's even tougher to, as David Barr says, to rise above the noise and stand out in what you believe in, what you stand for. What we've got Terry saying, inauthentic stuff. Yes, Jim Kerr. Um, Alrighty, thank you, Terry, for sticking around. All right, folks, it is now the time of the interview for us, and you may be thinking, what? Is it gossip time, or share the fun pickup lines time, or tell an embarrassing joke time? Unfortunately, we are not that type of a show. Well, not yet anyway. But what it is time for is the 48-hour challenge time. So, Jim, this is where I ask you to share, what is that one thing that our viewers and listeners can implement when it comes to building and leading an indispensable business in the next 48 hours that doesn't cost an arm and a leg or requires a large team to execute it?
Well, I'm going to get biblical on you, and I'm
Okay.
going to suggest this. Treat the people that you work with the way you want to be treated.
Oh, yes.
I think that's the heart of decency. I think it's sort of a underlying theme of much of what we spoke about today, Amber. So let me leave your network with that idea.
I love that. Treat the people you work with like you would like to be treated. Yes, and it goes again. It's the theme throughout our life. It should be the theme throughout our lives. Whether it's people in a relationships, a family or friends or business relationships.
Right.
And that's the way to build authentic relationships and share an authentic message. So that's a lovely way to end this conversation, Jim. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had a good time.
I absolutely loved it, Amber. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Those of you who joined us live, thank you so much. I really, really heart you. I do. This show wouldn't be so much fun without people joining us. Kajal just joined. Kajal, we're just about to end the show, but you'll be able to watch the recording later on in the YouTube show. I will be sharing the links later on with everybody. So thank you, James. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Toodaloo for now.
Au revoir.